Roger Martin, thank you so much for coming on the Inner Edison Podcast. I really appreciate you being here today.
I'm glad to be here, man. Thank you so much for having me, Ed.
It's a pleasure. All right. So a lot of people aren't going to know who you are. So
Sure.
quick little background.
Yeah, I currently am a co-founder and CEO of a group fitness brand, a nationwide group fitness concept called Rockbox Fitness. I'm also a co-founder and board member of another national franchise called Beamlight Sauna, which is an infrared sauna studio concept. And I am a corporate refugee. I spent 25 years in corporate America in the pharmaceutical industry. And in 2017, at the age of 46, I decided I no longer wanted to work for the establishment. I wanted to work for myself and help other people make a lot of money. I was making a lot of money for other people, and I wanted to obviously make that wealth for myself, but then help entrepreneurs, because we were in franchising, help them follow their dreams as well. And then I've gotten involved in some other companies since then, and I'm involved in a lot of things. But I love that. I love being busy, and I love expanding, kind of my imprint and impact on others.
All right. So pharmaceutical industry, what did you focus on?
Yeah, the vast majority of my career was in sales and marketing. So I started as a sales rep right out of undergrad, and then ended up working for 4 different companies, publicly held companies, big Fortune 50s is where I started, and then ended up working for private equity at the end as a chief operating officer. So I started as a sales rep, ended as a chief operating officer, and even as a COO, I was still heavily responsible for revenue generation. So I can tell you that from the time I really, even in high school, my first jobs in high school, it was all about sales and revenue generation and increasing the top line for whatever company I was working for. And I just did that at a bigger scale. At one point in pharma, I was managing 505 people, I think, with a top line responsibility of about 400 million, a budget of about 80 million. So I was very fortunate to get a lot of leadership experience, a lot of hiring experience, and at a pretty young age in that industry. And I'm very grateful for that. I have no desire to go back there, but very grateful for the time that I spent and the training I got and the experience that I was able to accumulate.
What I was trying to get at is, first of all, only people who don't think people sells are the marketing department.
Sure. Sure.
You laugh, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
100%. Yeah.
They need it. No, you need the sales department, because nothing happens around here unless it's sold. You don't have a job unless somebody in sales can sell it. I've been in sales my whole life.
Yep.
And most people, don't think they're in sales. I don't care what position you are in a company or what you do. You have to sell something, and you need to learn how to do sales very well. But the reason I was trying to get in the pharmaceutical, what did you focus on? Was it drug wise? Was there certain drugs?
Yeah. Great, fair question. And, over 25 years, I have to say I touched, I don't know how many therapeutic classes.
Okay.
So
there wasn't one specific for get people in health or anything. Okay. No, I was trying to see if there was some relationship from your pharmaceutical days to how you got into the fitness industry.
Well, great question. And I'll tell you that, I had this epiphany. I was at a conference. Long story short, I was at a conference in Barcelona, Spain, on a full expense account, making multiple 6 figures as a COO. But I looked out across this sea of faceless names, and I had disdain for these people for about 5 milliseconds. And then I realized, no, Ed, it's not them. It's me. Like I've come to the end of my journey in this business, 25 years, that was a long time. And it just became that it didn't matter how much money, didn't matter what title, I wasn't fulfilling my purpose. I wasn't happy what I was doing, and it wasn't the legacy I wanted to leave. So to answer your question, I spent the first 25 years of my life teaching people and leading people on how to sell, a pill that treated them but never cured people. Right? If you cured them, you lost a customer, right? So the pharma industry, a lot of it is built around treating but not curing. And of course, there's some great life-saving medicines, and there's a very important role for that industry. But I've always been into health, fitness, taking care of myself. That's ebbed and flowed throughout my life, depending on where I'm at. But I've always come back to it. And what I wanted to do is, instead of helping people get better when they were sick, is, hey, could I start businesses that actually help people prevent getting sick and teach them to take care of themselves and eat right and make exercise a part of their weekly routine. And that's how Rockbox Fitness was born. Whole long story we don't have to get into on how that came about, but that was the genesis. Is I wanted to really go from one polar opposite, or one polar end to the other of my impact. And it was, geez, let me see if I can create a business that actually helps people prevent them from getting sick, and take care of themselves, wellness care versus sickness treatment.
Well, I mean, if you look at where how sick and overweight we are in our, and it's, and a lot of that. So I'm from the military, and I was in the medical field when I was in, and so I understand everything about fitness. I was in physical therapy, so, and even myself ebbs and flows with how much weight I have versus how in shape I am, depending on what's going on in my life and everything else.
Me too.
To the point where you get to a point where you're like, okay, things got to change. I know exactly what to do. It's not rocket science, but it's again about making it a priority. And sometimes in life, it's not a priority. But my real question is, there's a lot of people who need help out there. I mean, you have now with drugs like Ozempic. I'm not going to get into the whole thing of that, which is helping a lot of people. And a lot of people are like, well, there's a problem with that because there's some people who are so overweight that they just need to take it and get that weight off, because I don't care what it is, whatever it is that helps you. It's the same thing I say when I do Helping the Brave. However you deal with your PTSD and can get over it, I don't care how that is. I'm not going to judge you for what you do or how you get there. That's not for us. Don't question, but you just need to do what's best for you. Is that kind of your take on the same thing too? At a certain point.
Yeah, I agree with you. If somebody is morbidly obese, let's kickstart their journey however we need to do that. Somebody that's 20 pounds overweight, injecting themselves with Ozempic,
that's not but it shouldn't be for 20 pounds. It's
Yeah,
supposed to be like 60 pounds or more, depending. Well, it depends on your frame. Right. If you're 5'4" and you're 60 pounds overweight, that's a lot of weight. So.
But you're going to find that, for sure. But you're going to find the majority, and they'll probably never release this data, but the majority of the users are not morbidly obese. It's people that, are using it for aesthetic reasons. And as I'm sure people listening know that, yes, you lose fat, but you also lose lean muscle, and then the fat comes back, but the lean muscle doesn't. And I've been in that industry for 25 years. I know how this movie ends, because there's always been a miracle drug that comes out every 5, 6, 7 years. Turns out not to be a miracle drug. There's always the pros and cons. But I'm glad that drug is available for the people that really, really need that kickstart. But even the people that are, 300 pounds overweight still need to learn how to eat well and start moving their body somehow. I don't care if it's just walking up and down your hallway. Start moving your body. But this as well. You can't make somebody care, especially about their own health. Like they have to walk that path on their own. But when they're ready, that's our business is for when people are ready, we're ready for them and we meet them where they're at. But everybody has to walk. I'm with you. I can't judge. Everybody's got their own bag of hammers, and when it's the right time for them, it's the right time for them.
Well, and people have to figure out why the weight's there too, because a lot of people have.
That's a whole podcast. That's a whole podcast.
That's another why, what happened to them in their childhood to make it to where it's there. My biggest problem was when I was a kid, I was dirt road poor and we didn't have any food. And, and then I got in the Navy and was like, food, oh my goodness. But I wasn't overweight because I worked out so much. And then when I hit 33, I still was never overweight. I found weights and I got huge. And so I lifted and ate like you're supposed to. Good, but like you needed to with all those calories. And then years later, you're like, okay, I'm not lifting as much. I'm doing this other stuff. Or I got into triathlon because I got tired of being huge. Got into triathlons, and you still have to eat all the food. But then when you stop that, you're so used to that type of meals and what your body's used to eating so much that if you don't really watch it, you can get overweight. Because I remember years ago when I was younger, they were like, oh, bodybuilders, all that turns into fat. No, what you keep eating turns into fat, because you stop working out. So.
It's funny, my father actually grew up, I was fortunate to grow up kind of, middle class. But my father grew up very, very, very poor. And he literally has said that so many times. He's finally got his weight under control. He's almost 80 now, but for all my life, he was 60, 70 pounds overweight. And he goes, when I got into my 20s, I started making a few dollars and could actually eat and didn't just never stop, just started and never stopped. But he said it was such a luxury that, I didn't begrudge it at the time. I wish I would have controlled a little bit more, but he said, when you grow up with nothing and now you can actually afford to go out and eat and do what you want, he goes, it's kind of hard to stop yourself.
Yeah. Well, and I think that Ozempic would be better than a lot of the surgeries they do,
Yeah.
because what I've been researching and stuff, I looked into it was the fact that a lot of people commit suicide and have high depression after bariatric surgeries and stuff like that.
I did not know that. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I know that this surgery is not the end all be all, but I can see that though, because
Yeah. Well, it's the
it's sold
same.
as, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. You take away one addiction for something else, and then but how many people fail on those? So many
yeah,
people. I know 6 people who are back up,
yep,
after they've had it. And it's like, so again, it all has to do with, some type of control. And eventually we'll get to other parts of the podcast. But if you're in the fitness industry, this is what you deal with. This is
yeah,
what one of your biggest things you have to overcome. And how do you get people to get there?
yep,
What is Rock Box? I mean, I know
yeah,
it's a fitness thing, but
sure.
what's the background in it?
Yeah. So I had got together with another a business partner who had already started a kickboxing for
Okay.
fitness, group fitness experience. So nobody gets punched. There's no sparring. I actually love MMA and I'm super passionate about it and boxing. But we wanted to create something that was very accessible for anyone and everyone that wanted to lose weight. And our core consumer is not the boxer, or the fighter, or the ripped athlete. It's that deconditioned American that says, I mean, I've joined gyms and I always quit. I've even hired personal trainers and I quit going. They want something that's fun, that's engaging, that isn't boring. The biggest problem with 3 sets of 10 again and again and again, unless you're super dedicated and disciplined, it gets boring and people quit. And so Rockbox was born out of, how do we solve the problem for boredom and kind of create this experience that is almost like going to a live music event. And when you go to a live music event, I always share with, when I'm telling the story of Rockbox, that no one ever went and saw a great band, a rock band, and went home that night and said, "Man, we should have stayed in tonight." They never, it's always like, "Oh my god, that was fantastic." And what happens is, right before that headliner goes on, the lights go down, the haze comes up, and that, and it's starting to get loud, and you can see them starting to walk out on stage, and you get those butterflies, like it's about to pop off, like I know this energy is about to go. And so we wanted to create that feeling every hour on the hour. So Rockbox is boxing and kickboxing. There's 2 different sets of rows of bags, and then the other side of the studio is functional fitness. So just think kettlebells, dumbbells, battle ropes, TRX. Not bikes or treadmills, but actually moving your body, functional strength that core strength and lean muscle. And we combine those two. So half the class is boxing, kickboxing. The other half is functional strength. But it's set to like curated playlist with an instructor on the mic calling the combos for the boxing side to do. And then we have like kiosks that show the people how to safely do the exercise on the other side. And there's color changing lighting that's installed in the ceilings that kind of feels like stage lighting. So it's a really fun, engaging community environment, but a hell of a workout. And if you've ever boxed or kickboxed, like it doesn't take long until you realize, I haven't used these muscles in a long time. But we've wrapped it in a wrapper that makes it much more appealing for people to want to stick with. Because as you said, there's two things in fitness. You got to get motivated to start, and then you have to stay motivated to keep going, because fitness is for life. Moving your body and trying to eat somewhat healthy and clean is for life. It's not a program. It's not a 3-week thing. You have to keep doing it. But if you lose your mind because you're so bored, you won't. And if it's not engaging, you won't. But if it feels like a pretty damn good time, like a nightclub, but no hangover, no barbell, it's a lot easier to get people to stay engaged.
I mean, because lifting is, like you said, it takes forever to see really good benefits
Sure,
from it, but
sure.
see, and I love cycling because that's what
Mhm.
when I was a kid, I used to ride out to my grandfather's dairy on a bike. And that's really I got into cycling, but the problem is
Yeah,
so dangerous now.
sure,
I
sure.
mean, so many people, I'm in Modesto, California. I know so many people have been killed by people not really caring. And then after the pandemic, there's just no way I'm going to be on the road with these people, because
Yeah,
even in a car, I'm scared.
sure,
So,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
is
yeah.
Rock Box out of?
Yep. So we're based in Charlotte, North Carolina, but we're nationwide. We're in 22, 21 states. I don't think we have one in Modesto. We have one in California. We have one in Pacific Beach, San Diego, and then there's one up in Northern Cal. I just can't recall the city in Northern Cal. But yeah, so we're it's across the nation, 20, 21 different states. We have 60 locations, all franchised, and continuing to grow. We just awarded a license in Boston, so we'll have a studio opening up in that area pretty soon too.
So so franchising, in case somebody wants to get involved and that is it. So it's a franchise, and what's the cost to get into it? Is it depending on where it's located, how big it is, or
Yeah, exactly. And so if anybody wants to find out about it, they can go to Rockbox Fitness, ROCK, BOX and then there's, I think on the top right, there's a franchising button they can click. No obligation. It'll open up more of a portal for information, because there's financial disclosures and different things. It's a very regulated industry. It's funny. I left pharma, which is highly regulated, and then I got into franchising, and I didn't realize how regulated it is. But it's regulated for the right reasons, to make sure that the business is appropriately represented and the financials are appropriately reported, and our financials corporately are audited. So they would just go to rockboxfitness.com and then click on the franchise, learn more about franchising, and then there's like steps to it. It's about a 6-week process to go through the whole process to really understand, and we get to know you and you get to know us to make sure it's a good fit.
Yeah, I went to your page to find out where it was in California. It doesn't show the location.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you should have locations that are available.
Well, there should be a location somewhere, like where you type in your zip code. If there's not, let me know. But
I just don't know where. Well, I was looking at where availability and closed territories, right? And then our current, it doesn't. I don't know.
Well, that's on the franchising page. If you go to the main, just rockboxfitness.com, there's locations on there.
Okay, just curious. Oh, I see. You put your zip code right there. It's in Roseville.
That's right. I just couldn't think of the. Yep.
Yeah. Well, those are two completely where you could go be in one place and have a lot of people come to you, because there's a lot of people in Roseville, in Sacramento County.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a great location. And then down in where you were talking about in San Diego County.
Oh, she kills it down there. Kills it.
Because of San Diego.
Yeah.
I lived in San Diego for 20 some years, and I was always in great shape down there, because it was always a good, it was always a normal temperature outside.
Yeah.
Not like where I am in Modesto, California, where during the summer we get 110 to 115.
Whew.
It's a dry heat.
Yeah. I lived in Phoenix for 4 years and Palm Springs for 3. So
those are worse. Both of those are worse than where I'm at. Yeah.
But it's hot. It's people say it's a dry heat. So is an oven.
Yeah. But I mean, we have 20, if we're lucky, 18 to 20 days in the whole year that, it's not so bad. I have air conditioning. I'm in, and it's usually during the week most of the time. So I'm in a studio or somewhere else.
Cool.
So one of the things I wanted to get in today was talking about, now we got where you're at and you have that, is one of your statements on your book was how to hire, fire, and lead efficiently. And I know most business owners have no idea how to do that, or they think they do, but they hire real fast and then fire super slow.
Yeah. Get it
when
backwards.
it's supposed to be the opposite way, but most of small businesses need somebody right away. The worst part in where I am in California, you're always, an employee and never a contractor anymore.
Yep.
So it's different in every state, but we have a unique employee, and then our minimum wage on certain things are ridiculous.
Yeah, it's gone up for sure. I published a book in January of 2024 called An Insider's Guide to Business: Secrets from an Entrepreneur's Playbook. And in this book, An Insider's Guide to Business, it's funny because you said everyone's in sales. Like you said that earlier in this podcast. That is actually literally the title of chapter 7. So we're jiving here.
I haven't read your book, have not looked at your table contents, just to be honest with you.
No, I mean, it's so funny because I believe that, and I talk about that. Everyone is in sales, right? And it's so true. But if we shift to your question around hiring and leading and effective,
if you want to go somewhere else with that, I don't care.
No, not at all. I think the listeners, if I see a franchisee, because I have the benefit of seeing so many business owners operate, and some of them doing really, really well, some of them not as strong. And Ed, where they usually fall down is the team. It's the team they hire, and those leaders listening know, when you've got a great team, my gosh, does life get easier? Life get easier when you've got a great high performing team. But that's not just going to happen. And so I, again, was very fortunate in my 30s. I was trained on competency selection interviewing by the Hay Group. They later got acquired by Korn Ferry, which is a huge recruiting firm. But the Hay Group was like a spinoff of Boston Consulting Group, and my company invested a lot of money into us in teaching us very effective hiring practices, and it was all around competency selection, behavioral interviewing, and that's how we interviewed, and that's how I've interviewed ever since. I've actually brought a different consultancy firm into my current companies to train my employees that lead people on how to hire, because it's that important. So I would just break it into 3 sections. One is, it's hiring, leading, and then unfortunately some people have to be terminated. And around hiring, too many managers, and I go into depth in the book about this, but too many managers, hiring managers, ask what I call throwaway questions, like, hey, what would you do in this situation if you were to come to work here? Okay, well, what happened is you just asked a hypothetical question. So the interviewee, their only option now is to give you a hypothetical answer. Well, in a story world, here's what I would do. Well, we didn't learn anything from that. Maybe a little bit of their critical thinking, but it's so much more effective to use competency selection and behaviorals, meaning I'm going to hire for traits, not for skills. And so many times a hiring manager will think, oh, this person has a lot of experience. Well, they've actually been doing the same role for 10 years, which means they have 1 year of experience. They repeated 10 years in a row. Have they actually ascended? Have they taken on more levels of responsibility? Have they learned and acquired new skill sets? A lot of employees out there, unfortunately, have not. About 90% of the people, a Harvard Business Review article, not me, cited 90% of Americans don't have a learning mindset, which means they won't proactively they won't listen to this podcast. Like your listeners are trying to better their life. They're trying to improve. The 90% of our population will only learn when prompted by their employer, or there's a certification they have to get. There has to be a reason, or they'll watch Netflix. It's the 10% that want to invest in their own learning, want to continually learn. That's who we're looking for, and which means we have to interview a lot of people to find that right person. But we want to ask behavioral questions, meaning in the past, I want to hear of a specific example of when you had to overcome a problem and you were working towards that solution through a team, something like that. I'm just making this up. And then now tell me specifically, let's make a timeline. Tell me specifically what happened. What were you thinking? What were you feeling? What did you say? Why did you choose to say that? What was your next action? What happened then? How did she react? What were you thinking when she reacted that way? Like, we're going to walk through an actual work experience. And usually I ask for in the last 2 years, so the details are fresh in their mind. But what happens is it's an exhausting process for me and for the interviewee. However, when the interviewee leaves, he or she knows, I got to tell my story. I got to tell how I work, how I think, how I act. And, that may be good or bad, depending on their abilities. But I learn, what are their traits? What are their actual traits? Because I can't put in what God left out. I can teach them how to sell. I can teach them how to inspire, to lead. I can't teach them work ethic. I can't teach them critical thinking skills. If they're 30 or 40 years old, I can't teach them these things that are hardwired in by the time they get to me. And so I'm interviewing for those traits. I'll teach the skills. If they have the skill sets and the traits, home run. But and I hire a lot of young people. My companies are staffed with more young people than my age, because I've just found that usually by the time that person, I'm 53, by the time a 53-year-old guy or gal gets to me, I'm probably not going to be able to change them that much or affect them. But a younger person that has the traits, maybe not the skills or experience, man, they're a sponge. They want to grow. They want, if I've hired that 10%, not the 90 that don't want to learn, but the 10% that want to learn. And I've just had a lot of success doing that. So I write about that and how to do that, and the questions that you ask, the questions you don't ask. And I'm sure some people are going to read that chapter and go, well, what's wrong with that question? But I'll explain, I explain below why, because some of these questions are so steeped in our interviewing culture that people just assume they're good questions, and they're literally, they don't teach you anything. They don't tell you anything about the candidate. So, hiring is a skill set, and if you are going to scale a business, you better be damn good at hiring, period, full stop. And then there's leading, and leading, I talk about this concept of, it may not be my fault, but it's my responsibility. and I think the military, then you have a lot of experience in it. The military is like any big organization, it can be bureaucratic, but if you're out on, if you're on a mission, if you're on the battlefield, it is not about whose fault it's about. We have a mission to complete. We'll do the lessons learned afterwards. But right now, it doesn't matter whose fault this is. It's the person, it's the command, it's the leader of that, platoon or whatever it is. It's their responsibility. And there's never a doubt about whose responsibility it is. In corporate America, a lot of times, if something goes wrong, and I lived this for 25 years, well, first, who's to blame? Because I don't want to be caught in the crossfire, right? I don't, who's to blame? Versus, wait a second, it doesn't matter. We'll figure that out. We'll do root cause analysis after this dust settles. We have a customer issue, we have a supply issue, whatever it is. Let's solve this because it's my responsibility. And so I go in depth around this concept of it's not my fault, but it's my responsibility, and I give concrete examples of that, and things I had to just stand in front of my team and say, I screwed up, man. Like flat out, I messed up. I took us on a right turn when we should have gone left. So here's where we're at, and here's what we need to do. I own this. Like, no, it's my fault. It is my fault and my responsibility. And I think that humility in leadership, it's becoming, I think, more expected, especially from this younger generation. You can't just say jump and they're going to say how high. That's not how employees work today. So some days I wish that were the case, but it's not the case. And so I think it demands more of us as a leader, a lot more of us as a leader, to be more effective in how we lead, not just tell people what to do. And I talk also in this book about making the journey theirs. And what I mean by that, Ed, is I can't just say, hey, Ed, I need you to go do this task and have it done by Wednesday. Because if Ed's a millennial or a Gen Z, he's probably going to say, why? And I know he's going to say why. So instead of waiting for that, I'll say, Ed, we have this situation. What are your thoughts on how we can, solve X, whatever? And I want to get your input, because if I can make the journey yours, you're coming with me on this journey, then when we come to this decision that, well, you actually have to go do this task and it has to be done by Wednesday, you're going to have much more ownership in that. You're going to feel better about it, and you're going to feel empowered. And again, it's not manipulation by any means. I'm not advocating that. I'm advocating be a real leader and seek the input of your team and help them understand why we're going to take that hill. To use a military, we're taking that hill, but here's why, and here's what's to gain from it, and here's your role in it, and here's when we need to do it by. What are your thoughts? Is there another way? Do you see another way up this hill? Okay, if not, we'll go my way. But we're in this interesting period where there's people of my generation, Gen X, that are leading a lot of millennials and Gen Z, and it's not the way we were led. We can't lead the way we were led, and be as effective. So I go into depth, a lot of different stories and examples in that aspect. And then lastly,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, you're totally right. You can't, they're totally different people. And where we're like, it was a privilege to work. It's not a privilege for them to work at all. It's a nuisance.
You could wave a dollar bill in front of a Gen X, the vast majority of Gen X, and all right, how do I get that? Where do I run? What do I got to do? And you're right. And I was really thankful to have a job. The world's changed. And there's a lot of people my age that are been out of shape about that, but getting upset about it's not going to change it. Like, how can you adapt and make it a competitive advantage? If everyone else is stuck in their ways, that's, in my age bracket, that's a competitive advantage for me as a business owner and business leader to adapt my style to, so that I get that talent and they don't.
Yeah. I mean, because you're right. They'll ask you why. And when I did that in the military, they say, because I told you to.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because I'm the boss and you're the employee. And, and there's so many, but I'm seeing like my son's 21, 22 and below are totally different. They're totally like baby boomers and us, our generation that you just kept throwing out there. More so like, hey, we're going through hard times and we understand we just got to go through it. I think the problem with the group that you're talking about, and they asked why, they were spoiled to a certain point to where we as parents go, hey, we don't want them to work as hard, go ahead and do your high school and college and not have to work or have a struggle, which is the worst thing we ever did. And
so we're 100% alignment. Someone said, it's not mine, I can't take credit for this, but Our parents, I'm 53 again. Our parents told us how they were going to parent us, and we said, okay. Our children of my generation told us how they wanted to be parented, and we said, okay. That's the
Not all of
problem.
us did.
Yeah,
Not all
this
of
is
us
true.
did.
This
Yeah.
is true. This is true.
But yeah, I mean, and
Yeah.
some of it, I came from the military side, so my kids that I adopted my wife's 3 kids, and I had 2 of my so there, and my wife's like, "Oh, you can't." I'm like, "This is how I'm," they got 2 different parents.
Yep.
You parent your way, I parent my way, and we'll see which one works on the other side. I'm gonna tell you right now, my kids tell me, I'm glad dad was harder on me because of
Sure.
this and this, and it makes it easier for me to do this. And that's all I wanted them to understand. Life is not fair. First thing if you learn life's not fair, the rest of it's easy.
Yeah. Yeah. The
'Cause
faster you accept that, the happier you're going to be. Yeah,
right. Yeah.
for sure.
But back to the whole sales thing, I did I've been in sales forever. And one of the biggest headaches I always thought was when people said people don't buy because they just don't know, and they'd spell out KNOW, right? Because they just don't know. And I always thought that was the dumbest thing. So I had to do a presentation on sales, and I said how to get through no, KNOW. And basically it was knowledge needed to overcome waiting. And that's the acronym that I use now. And I tell people that's if somebody's not buying or moving forward, it's because you've not helped them understand why they need to move forward. They're waiting because you haven't explained it to them. And
Yep.
you have to explain that to them. And I don't mean manipulate them. I mean, persuade them. You're
Mhm.
trying to help them get to where they want to go anyway,
Yep.
because they came to you for that. So you're just helping them. So once you learn how to get them past the waiting, then you're so much better.
Yeah, that waiting and I need to think about it means, again, like you said, you have not thoroughly explained the benefit that outweighs the price. That you
Right.
just and so many people like, oh, they don't have any money, or well, they need to ask their spouse, or they're just not ready to make a decision. They're not, because you have not helped them bridge that gap. There's a gap that's filled by fear from no action to taking action. And if you can't bridge that gap for them with and you know this too, people buy on emotion. They don't buy with
Right.
logic. So using logic it's help them emotionally understand the benefits of this. Then you can justify it with logic, but they're going to make the decision based on emotion and
Mhm.
help them with that. Yeah,
They always justify with logic.
100%.
That's why they have buyer's remorse
Yep.
later. But you're right. I mean, you have to help them through that process because people don't want to make a decision. First of all, they hate making decisions, and they do it for 2 reasons: pain or pleasure. And most of the time, they won't do it for pleasure. They wait until it's very painful to do it. To make
100%.
yeah.
Yep. Yep. You've heard this, it's try to sell a vitamin. Somebody, hey, take this for 6 months. You'll probably feel better. You may not feel anything for a long time, but trust me, it's good for you. No way. Hey, you've got back pain. Here's an anti-inflammatory, and it's $50, but it'll alleviate your pain immediately. Sold. It's pain pills, and if you think of your product or your service in terms of how does it solve someone's pain point, you're ahead of 95% of the people.
Yeah. Well, and I also find it, I always tell people don't know who their perfect client is ever.
Mm,
They think they do, but they don't. Or
yeah.
they say, well, it's pretty much everybody. No, it's not.
That's
And I tell people and then if you can get 2 niches that intersect, then you finally really taken it down to where it needed to be at.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't understand what I mean by I deal with veterans,
Mm,
but a veteran business owner is when it intersects. That's a perfect client for me because I can
yep.
help them for other reasons with how they do their stuff. And that's what you need to do with whatever your business is. Take it down to the very smallest niche. Doesn't mean you can't service everybody else. It just means who you focus on.
And you will make so much more money as a smaller mid-sized business owner if you niche down, like, period. End of story. Because you can't compete with a giant Fortune 500, Fortune 100 company going after a mass market. But as a smaller mid-sized business, you can kill the game when that is my avatar. And these
Right.
people that are not, I'm not going to spend money to go get them. If they come, like you said, if they come, that's great. But I'm focusing my marketing dollars on this niche right here. That's it.
And that's what you have to do. Because I mean, like you're right, you can't compete against huge corporation, but they're wasting money anyway.
100%.
So I mean, they're losing billions a month right now, especially in my industry. Those big giant mortgage companies are like, oh, we lost 20 billion this quarter. No big deal.
So other people's money, OPM. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the government. We won't get
Yeah.
into that one. We'll
Yeah.
be here all day.
Well,
I do talk radio, so I spend hours on that.
Well, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure.
And
And then
man, that all goes back to, you don't spend people's money the way that you spend your own money.
yeah,
And as a business owner, because I worked for a guy and I thought I spent his money the same way I did. No, when you became the business owner, you spend it totally different. When that's the problem with with the government, they're spending other people's money and they don't get that.
uh, and I don't even think it's because I've worked for even my own companies. I watched expenses balloon. Nobody's doing with malice. It's just,
No.
hey, we need this piece of software. It's
Okay.
used for 2 months, and then nobody uses it again, but we forget about it. And then you check the statements. You're like, wait, what are we spending $400 a month on? That's $5,000 a year. Who uses this? Nobody. And then that's just one, and then you
Right.
start adding all that stuff up. So if you magnify that, across our country and the trillions of dollars, I can see how it gets out of hand so quickly. But of course, again, this is a whole nother podcast. I don't think anybody has any idea how to get it back under control, but we need to.
Yeah, it's called term limits and change of administration.
Yep,
The biggest, someone asked me on a podcast, if you were a dictator for a day, what would you change? I said term limits. They looked at me like, that's it? I go, yeah, that'd fix freaking everything.
Yep.
Because you wouldn't have the lobbyist giving a bartender so much money that she got into the business with broke, and now she's worth over $20 million.
Yep.
Where's the problem here?
Yep.
Yeah. And
100%.
yeah. What are you
And
gonna
then I'll tie the whole thing with hiring, leading, and then the thing about terminating, because we do have to terminate people at times, and performance manage. And you said they hire too slow, and then they hire too fast and fire too slow, and it should be the opposite of that. When you decide to terminate somebody, that moment is when you need to take action. Usually we decide to terminate somebody and then we do it 6 months later. It's the moment you have that epiphany, you go in and you have that hard conversation. And I talk about this in the book again. And by the way, I know I'm pimping this book right now, but I'm proud of it. But every single penny goes to a charity called To Write Love in Our Arms. I've made a dime off this book and never will. It is a charity that helps people that are committing self-harm, and it helps prevent suicide as well, because a lot of times self-harm will lead to suicide. So all profits, besides what Amazon takes, everything goes to Write Love in Our Arms, this charity, and which is Rockbox's national charity partner as well. But once you decide to terminate somebody, you do it, and you bring them and you rush the conflict, and you say, Ed, I'm about to share some news with you that you're not going to like, but I wanted to do this directly so that there was nothing left up to your imagination. And today is your last day of employment. I'm terminating your employment effective today. I know you're going to land on your feet. You have a lot of good qualities that I'm sure some other employer in the marketplace is going to be very excited to have. But this is not the right company for you, and you're not the right employee for us. And and again, everybody's got depending on their company, different HR rules and stuff. But the average small business, man, you got to there's not the red tape, and you just got to get to it. But you need to terminate with empathy and with not this, hey, you're fired. It's look, I'm going to share some news with you that you're not going to like, that you may not be wanting to hear, and then you just say it, but you say it with empathy, and you're going to land on your feet. If you have a small severance for them, whatever, you have them, you tell them that then. But it's and how would you like to exit the building? I want to make sure you can do this with grace and with your pride intact. Would you like to do this? I always usually terminate people near the end of the day so that most people are gone. But you do it with empathy and tact. And the reason I say that is because if you do that, it comes back to you tenfold. And I've had people that I've terminated that then I later got a promotion or had some success with the business, and they've reached out to me to congratulate me. Somebody that I've terminated because I did it the right way with true empathy, genuine caring, just knowing this was not the company for them. But they have good skill sets. I mean, there's a reason I hired them in the first place. It didn't work out the way I wanted it to work out, or I thought it should work out, but they're still a good human being. And so let's treat them like a good human being. And it's so funny, man. Like literally earlier today, I gave a job recommendation. I recommended somebody who my business partner had to terminate. The person was in one of our companies, and it was just not the right fit. It was the right person, but at the wrong time in the wrong company. And when I gave this recommendation to somebody that reached out to me and say, "Hey, I know this person worked for you. Can you give me some feedback?" And I said, "Right person, wrong company, wrong time. Here are the qualities. here's where you may want to keep the sandbox kind of tight, but, good person. And I wouldn't say that termination went with empathy. Just when I replay that in my head, I didn't do that termination, but it's funny how life literally goes 360. So don't burn a bridge. Don't prove your point as a tough boss. You're fired, jerk, get out. It'll never serve you. It'll serve you for 2 minutes. And then somewhere down the line, it's going to come back. So again, I write some examples of when I've done it right and when I've done it wrong. And when I've tried to do it right most times. And when I do it right, it is amazing how thankful people are, because they always go find a job that makes them so much happier, because they were underperforming. They knew they were underperforming, and I knew they were underperforming. And so it allowed them to go do something that made them a lot happier. And then they realize they don't realize that in the moment. Of course, it's awkward and it's a tough conversation, but almost always, if you do it right and you do it with empathy and you terminate, with an empathetic manner, they're going to be appreciative once they realize it was the best move for them too.
Not everybody will.
This is fair. I'll give you that.
Because when you said that, I was like, okay, because I know my stepbrother, I guess, worked for me for many years, and I kept saying I got to get rid of him because he's making these mistakes, and I didn't do it right away. Finally, I did it because it was a huge mistake. He still won't talk to me to this day, and that was like almost 10 years ago. So
that's family and business too, which is a whole nother dynamic, right?
No, you should never, because I had a guy who was like going to go work for this father-in-law, and he goes, should I go? I would never work for family again. Yeah. But everybody's different, and he worked and it worked out, but that was good for him. But and what people don't realize is when we have to fire somebody, it is as much us doing it is horrible. We don't want to do it, and it's challenging for us to do it. We hate to do it, but they don't understand that side of it until they become a business owner.
You're right.
If they ever do. So
you're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Yeah. Roger, it was a pleasure today having you on.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thank you. Maybe we'll do this again sometime. We'll go down one of those rabbit holes, because you open up a lot of. I'm like, we could go there. That was fun.
It's only 30 minutes. You can't get everything done. Actually, like 42 today. But there's so much you can talk about, and I enjoy telling people stories across multiple mediums. So that's what I like doing.
Cool. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Roger, if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yep. 2 easy ways. They can follow me at Real Roger Martin, ROGER. And then if they want to learn more about the franchises that we offer, find out more about my book. I have a podcast as well, like you. They can go to thrivemorebrands.com. So just the word thrive, the word more, brands.com. I think there's a bunch of links on there for all the different businesses, franchising information, the book, all that kind of stuff.
All right. Again, thank you so much for being here today, Roger.
You bet. My pleasure. Thanks.
All right. Make it a great day.